The drawing arrived on a Tuesday. It came inside a plain white envelope with no return address, just a Pasadena postmark, and my name written in the unsteady handwriting of someone who had only recently learned that letters were supposed to go in a straight line. Inside was a single sheet of construction paper, the kind with the rough texture that catches crayon wax in small, satisfying ridges. Two figures stood beneath a yellow tree. One was short, round-headed, wearing what appeared to be a purple dress. The other was taller with brown hair that stuck out at an angle no human hair has ever naturally achieved. Underneath in red crayon, someone had written me and Aunt Morgan. I pressed the drawing flat against my kitchen table and kept my hand there for a long moment, feeling the waxy ridges under my fingertips. Outside my window, the Rocky Mountains caught the early November light in a way that made the snow along the ridgeline look almost warm. Almost like something you could reach out and touch. I had been in Denver for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I loaded the last box into my car in Silver Lake and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror, because I knew that if I looked, I would stop. 3 weeks since I signed the lease on this 8th-floor apartment with its impossible view and its unfamiliar silence. 3 weeks since I woke up every morning in a city where nobody knew my name unless I told them, and realized slowly that this was not loneliness. This was something closer to oxygen. People ask me sometimes whether I regret it. Whether I wish I had done something differently given in somewhere softened an edge that I kept too sharp. And every time someone asks me that, I feel something tighten in my chest. Not quite anger, not quite grief, but a combination of both that sits in the sternum like a bruise you forget about until someone presses exactly the wrong spot. Here is what I know now that I did not know 6 months ago. The most dangerous agreements are the ones nobody asks you to sign. They are built out of expectations and family dinners, and the particular guilt that comes from being the one who left, the one who built a life that looked from the outside like it had room to spare. They are built slowly over years, until one day you look down and realize your name is attached to something you never agreed to, not in any language you would have recognized as consent. I was 34 years old. I was a senior risk analyst. I spent my professional life calculating the probability of catastrophic outcomes and designing systems to prevent them. I did not see my own family coming. This is the story of the 6 weeks that changed everything. It is not a comfortable story. It does not have the kind of ending where everyone learns something and gathers around a table and passes the bread. But it is true, every word of it, and I am telling it because somewhere out there is a woman sitting in a car in a parking lot, reading a text message that does not make sense, feeling the first cold edge of something she cannot yet name. I want her to know you are allowed to name it, and once you do, you are allowed to fight back. The drive from Silver Lake to Pasadena takes about 40 minutes on a good Saturday, longer if the 110 decides to remind you that Los Angeles was not designed with patience in mind. I had made this drive more times than I could count past the downtown skyline, past the exit. I always almost took by accident past the particular stretch of freeway where the jacaranda trees bloomed purple every spring and made the whole city look briefly like it was trying. I pulled into my parents' driveway at 2:30. Before I even cut the engine, the front door swung open and Avery came sprinting across the lawn in her socks arms already wide open, shrieking my name like I had been gone for a year instead of 3 weeks. Aunt Morgan. Aunt Morgan, come see what I made. It's a horse, but Tyler says it looks like a potato and he's wrong. He's so wrong. I caught her and swung her up and she laughed that full-body laugh that 6-year-olds do, the kind that takes over their whole face. My chest did something warm and stupid. It absolutely looks like a horse, I told her. Tyler doesn't know what he's talking about. That's what I said. Lily was waiting at the door, both arms stretched toward me, bouncing on her heels. At 4, she had not yet developed the patience for other people to finish their sentences. I carried Avery inside and scooped Lily up with my other arm, and for about 30 seconds I had 40 pounds of small human draped across me, and it was genuinely the best part of my week. Tyler was sitting on the back porch steps with a book. He was 10, which meant he had entered the phase where enthusiasm was something you managed carefully in public. But when he looked up and saw me, the corner of his mouth pulled into a real smile, the unguarded kind, before he caught himself and looked back down at his book. The backyard smelled like charcoal and someone's idea of coleslaw. My father Arthur stood at the grill with the focused expression of a man performing surgery, poking at chicken thighs with a pair of tongs. He raised the tongs in greeting when he saw me, which was his version of a hug. My mother Eleanor came out of the kitchen carrying a bowl of potato salad and wearing the smile she reserved for occasions she had already planned out in her head. It was a warm smile. It was also, I would later understand, a rehearsed one. "Morgan, sweetheart, you look tired. Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine, Mom. You need to eat more. Sit down, sit down." Cassidy was on the patio couch, one hand resting on her stomach, with the careful deliberateness of someone who wanted that gesture to be noticed. She was 30 years old, and had the particular talent of making every room arrange itself around her without appearing to try. Dinner passed the way family dinners do, loud in the right places, uncomfortable in others, held together by potato salad and the collective agreement not to say the thing everyone was thinking. Then Eleanor set down her fork. "We have wonderful news." She reached over and squeezed Cassidy's hand. "Tell her." Cassidy looked up. Her eyes were bright and her voice carried the tremor of someone performing vulnerability they had rehearsed. "I'm pregnant. 12 weeks." The table erupted. Arthur grinned. Avery asked if the baby would share her room. Lily clapped because everyone else was clapping. I said congratulations and I meant it, and then I watched my mother's expression shift just slightly, just enough into something that was no longer celebratory. "Morgan." Eleanor's voice dropped into its gentler register, the one she used when she had already decided something and was now presenting it as a conversation. "With a fourth baby coming, Cassidy is going to need real support. Consistent support. You have flexibility that the rest of us don't. No husband, no children." "Mom, I'm not saying it to hurt you, I'm saying it practically. You could work remotely. You've done it before. We're talking about family." My father studied his chicken. Cassidy stared at her plate with the focused attention of someone pretending to be surprised by a plan they had already agreed to. "I'm not doing it," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt, which was a professional habit I was grateful for. "I have a career. I have a life in Los Angeles. I love these kids more than I can say, but I am not their parent, and I'm not going to rearrange my entire existence." "Morgan." Eleanor's voice tightened. "This is not a request from a stranger. This is your family." "I know exactly who it's from," I said. "And the answer is still no." I pushed back from the table, carried my plate to the kitchen, and walked out to the back porch. The evening air was warm and smelled like someone 3 houses over was burning eucalyptus. I gripped the railing and breathed. I heard the door behind me open. Small footsteps. Tyler sat down on the top step beside me without a word, opened his book, and simply existed next to me in a way that was somehow the kindest thing anyone had done for me all day. We stayed like that until the sound of dinner winding down drifted through the screen door. An hour later, I was on the 110 heading back to Silver Lake when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text notification, automated system, generated the kind of formatting you recognize from government portals. LA County Superior Court Family Division. Reminder, guardianship hearing scheduled. Case file Vance Morgan A. listed as petitioner. I had never filed anything. I had never signed anything. I did not even know a case number existed. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, and for the first time that evening, I felt something that had nothing to do with family loyalty or dinner table arguments. I felt afraid. The 48 hours between that court notification and Monday morning were the longest of my life. I spent them pulling screenshots, reading California family law forums at 2 in the morning, and tracking down the name of a Koreatown attorney that a colleague at Meridian had mentioned once, almost in passing during a conversation about someone else's divorce. Her name was Victoria Chen. She picked up on the second ring. Victoria Chen's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Wilshire Boulevard in Koreatown, wedged between a dental clinic and an immigration law firm, which felt somehow exactly right for a place where people came to fight for things that belonged to them. The waiting room had 2 chairs, a small succulent on the windowsill, and no magazines, which told me Victoria did not expect her clients to wait long. She did not make me wait at all. "Sit down," she said before I had fully closed the door behind me. She was already at her desk reading glasses on a yellow legal pad in front of her. She was in her mid-40s, with the particular posture of someone who had spent 2 decades in courtrooms and stopped apologizing for taking up space. "Tell me everything. Start from the court notification. Don't editorialize, just facts." I told her everything. She wrote without looking up, filling the legal pad in handwriting so small and precise it looked like a different language. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me over her glasses. "3 documents," she said. "The lease guarantee, the emergency guardianship petition, and the health insurance consent form. Those are the 3 they would have needed to make this look credible. Do you have access to any of them?" The court notification included a case file number. "I can pull the petition." "Do that now on your phone. I need to see the signature page." She was already reaching for her own phone. "I'm texting Richard Harlow. He's a certified forensic document examiner. The court recognizes his work in LA County, which means his analysis carries evidentiary weight that a standard handwriting comparison does not. He charges $3,000, and he books out fast, so I'm contacting him before we finish this conversation." I looked up from my phone. "You believe me?" Victoria took her glasses off and set them on the desk. "I believe your documentation, which is why I need Richard to start immediately." In California, a forensic document examiner analyzes things like pen pressure, letter angle, the speed of individual strokes. He can determine with measurable statistical probability whether a signature is genuine. That report will take 10 to 14 days. We don't have the luxury of waiting to decide. She was already typing. I went back to pulling up the court file. The petition signature looked almost like mine. Almost. The loop on the capital M was slightly too wide and the A didn't connect the way mine did, small things, the kind you would never catch unless you were specifically looking. My stomach turned over. "There's something else," I said. I told her about Eleanor's text messages. She made me read them aloud twice and wrote every word verbatim. "That's a conspiracy to commit fraud," she said flatly, the way someone else might say it's going to rain. "And using your social security number in the filing constitutes identity theft under California Penal Code Section 530.5. We're filing a police report today. We're filing a police report today. You'll start at your nearest area station, but I want you to understand, identity theft investigations in Los Angeles are coordinated through LAPD's Commercial Crimes Division. That's who will ultimately carry the case." 2 days later, the situation deteriorated in a direction I had not anticipated. I was at my desk at Meridian Insurance Group on the 14th floor of a building on Figueroa Street in downtown Los Angeles. When Rachel Torres appeared in my doorway, her face doing something complicated. "Morgan," she said carefully, "there are people in the lobby, asking for you. It's your mom, and Cassidy, and 2 other people I don't recognize." My jaw tightened so hard my back teeth ached. "Call building security, now!" Rachel moved fast. By the time I reached the lobby, 2 security officers were already managing the situation, but Eleanor's voice was carrying across the marble floor with the full force of a woman who had spent 60 years being listened to in rooms that told her to be quiet. "She is my daughter," Eleanor was saying, her voice cracking at the edges in a way that sounded like grief and was actually something more strategic. "I have every right." "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice," the security officer said. Cassidy stood behind Eleanor, one hand on her stomach, eyes red. She looked at me across the lobby and her face crumpled. "Morgan, please, just talk to us. 5 minutes." "There is nothing to talk about," I said. My voice came out hard and flat, and I did not feel sorry for it. "You need to leave this building." Rachel had her phone out. She was recording everything: the lobby, the security officers, Eleanor's performance, Cassidy's tears, and she held it steady with both hands, even though I could see her fingers were trembling. That steadiness cost her something, and I would not forget it. Officer Ray Mendez of LAPD took the identity theft report that same afternoon. He was methodical and unhurried, the kind of cop who asked the same question 3 different ways to make sure the answer stayed consistent, and I respected that. "Under California Penal Code 530.5, he said, sliding a form across his desk. "Unauthorized use of another person's identifying information, including social security number and name in a legal filing, constitutes a criminal offense. We'll open the case today." The DA's office will determine whether to pursue charges. I signed the report. My hand was steady. I was getting better at that. The next morning, Rachel found me at the coffee station before anyone else arrived. "I have to tell you something," she said, dropping her voice low. "Yesterday, after everything, I was in the elevator with Sandra from HR. She didn't know I knew you, and she was on the phone, and I heard her say—" Rachel paused, choosing her words carefully. "She said someone had called in, a woman, older, very polite, asking about your employment status. Said you were going through a serious personal crisis and might not be fit to continue in your role." The coffee cup in my hand went very still. Every nerve in my body fired at once. "Sandra said the woman left a callback number," Rachel continued. "But Sandra thought it was strange enough that she flagged it internally instead of acting on it." I set the cup down before I spilled it. Eleanor had not just come after my legal identity. She had come after my professional one too, because a woman who appeared unstable would make a far less credible witness in a courtroom. It was precise. It was deliberate. It was the kind of move that took planning. My phone buzzed. A calendar notification from Victoria's office, hearing date confirmed. LA County Superior Court Family Division Room, 47, 2 weeks. Room 47 of the LA County Superior Court smelled like old paper and central air conditioning, and the particular kind of anxiety that soaks into institutional carpet over decades. The wooden benches were hard, the fluorescent lights were the color of a headache. And Judge Sandra Ortega, when she walked in at precisely 9 o'clock, moved like someone who had stopped being impressed by anything a long time ago and had made peace with that fact. Victoria touched my arm as we sat down. "Breathe," she said quietly. "You have everything you need. Let me work." I breathed. My hands were folded on the table in front of me, and I was gripping my own fingers hard enough to leave marks, but from the outside I looked calm. I had spent my entire career looking calm while things fell apart around me. I was good at it. I just had never had to do it in a courtroom before. Cassidy sat at the opposite table with her attorney, Dennis Rourke, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to winning on presentation alone. Technically, Cassidy was not a petitioner. She was the named beneficiary of the petition, the person whose interests the filing was designed to serve, while my name and social security number were used to give it legal standing. Her attorney had filed a notice of appearance 3 days prior. Eleanor and Arthur were in the gallery behind Cassidy. Eleanor was dressed in a soft blue cardigan, the kind of color that photographs well and signals trustworthiness to strangers. Arthur stared at his hands. I did not look at any of them for more than 2 seconds. I could not afford to. Judge Ortega settled her glasses on her nose and opened the case file. "We're here on an emergency guardianship petition filed under California Family Code Section 3221 with a contested identity claim attached. Mr. Rourke, your client is the petitioner of record. You may proceed." Rourke stood with the smooth unhurry of a man who believed he had already won. He painted Cassidy as a devoted mother, facing an impossible situation, a partner who had abandoned the family, a 4th child on the way, a sister who had verbally committed to helping and then withdrawn that commitment out of selfishness. He used the word selfishness twice. I felt Victoria's pen pause on her legal pad both times, though she did not look up. Then Rourke said, "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A," and slid a document across to the clerk. The commitment letter. My name at the bottom in handwriting that was almost mine. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Judge Ortega examined it. "Ms. Chen, your response." Victoria stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform urgently. She simply said, "Thank you, Your Honor," and opened her folder. "Counter Exhibit 1, she said, and handed a thick bound report to the clerk. "These are the findings of Richard Harlow, a forensic document examiner, certified by the California courts, with 22 years of experience and testimony in over 300 cases in this county alone. Mr. Harlow is present today and available for examination." A man in the quiet 60s wire-rimmed glasses raised his hand briefly. Mr. Harlow's analysis of the signatures on all 3 documents submitted by the petitioner, the commitment letter, the emergency guardianship filing, and the lease guarantee concludes with a statistical probability of 99.3% that the signatures attributed to Morgan Vance are not genuine. Victoria's voice was even and unhurried. The analysis is based on pen pressure mapping letter angle deviation stroke velocity and morphological comparison against 12 verified samples of Ms. Vance's actual signature obtained from notarized documents over the past 4 years. Rourke was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor, Foundation. Mr. Harlow has been accepted as a qualified expert witness under California Evidence Code Section 720, Ortega said without looking up from the report. Overruled. Continue, Ms. Chen. Counter Exhibit 2. Victoria handed over the LAPD identity theft report. Filed by Officer Ray Mez, Hollywood Division, documenting the unauthorized use of Morgan Vance's Social Security number and legal name in the petition, filing a violation of California Penal Code Section 530.5. She did not pause. Counter Exhibit 3. A sworn affidavit from Dr. Nina Patel, pediatrician at Kaiser Permanente Pasadena, stating under penalty of perjury that she did not sign the health insurance consent form submitted as part of this petition and that the signature bearing her name is not hers. Cassidy made a sound at the opposite table, small, involuntary, like air leaving a tire. Counter Exhibit 4. Video and audio recording from the lobby of Meridian Insurance Group. Victoria continued, her voice never wavering, documenting an incident in which members of the petitioner's family appeared at Ms. Vance's workplace and engaged in behavior consistent with intimidation and harassment. The recording was made by Rachel Torres, a colleague of Ms. Vance, and corroborated by 2 Meridian security officers, whose statements are attached. She set the last document on the clerk's desk with the quiet finality of someone placing the last piece of a puzzle. Counter Exhibit 5. A sworn affidavit from Marcus Webb, a neighbor of the Vance family residence in Pasadena for over 20 years, stating that approximately 6 weeks prior to this filing, he overheard a phone conversation in which Eleanor Vance discussed the petition and explicitly referenced ensuring that Morgan Vance's name would be attached to the case before she became aware of it. The courtroom was very still. Judge Ortega took off her glasses and looked at Cassidy's table for a long moment. Then she looked at Rourke. Counselor, I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond to what has just been submitted. Rourke's confidence had not disappeared. Men, like him, didn't let things disappear visibly, but something behind his eyes had recalibrated. He spoke for 4 minutes. It felt like watching someone try to build a sandcastle while the tide was already coming in. When he finished, Ortega said, "I'm calling a recess, 90 minutes. She stood. Everyone stood. The door behind the bench closed. I turned to Victoria. My throat was so tight I could barely push words through it. How did we do? Victoria capped her pen. We did our job, she said. Now we wait. In the hallway outside room 47, the air felt cooler, less compressed. I found a wooden bench against the wall and sat down hard, like my legs had simply decided they were done performing. Eleanor and Arthur had moved to the far end of the corridor. Eleanor was speaking to Rourke in a low, rapid voice, her hands moving in tight gestures. Arthur stood slightly behind her, looking at the middle distance, with the expression of a man who understood finally, and too late, exactly where all of this had led. Cassidy sat on a bench across from me, 10 feet away. Her attorney was on his phone. She was not. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not calculation, not the performance of vulnerability she had deployed so reliably for 30 years. It was something rawer than any of that. It was the look of someone who had watched the architecture of a plane collapse in real time and was only now beginning to understand that she had been inside the building when it fell. My chest ached. Not with anger. I had moved through anger days ago, but with something older and more complicated. This was my sister. These were the same eyes that had looked up at me from a car seat when I was 4 years old, and she was brand new, and I had decided on the spot that she was the most important thing I had ever seen. She opened her mouth. I thought she was going to apologize. Instead, she said, "I didn't think it would go this far." The words hit me somewhere below the sternum, sharp and hot. My eyes burned, and I pressed my back teeth together hard and breathed through my nose until the burning receded, because I was not going to cry in this hallway, not here, not in front of her. That, I said when I trusted my voice again, is the most honest thing you've said to me in 6 months. She flinched. I stood up, walked to the window at the end of the corridor, and pressed my palm flat against the cool glass, staring out at the gray Los Angeles sky until my heartbeat came back down to something manageable. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria: come back in. She's ready. The walk back into room 47 was the longest 40 feet I had ever covered. Victoria was already at the table, her legal pad closed, her hands folded on top of it. That told me something. Victoria Chen did not close her legal pad until there was nothing left to write. I sat down beside her and fixed my eyes on the bench and did not allow myself to look at Cassidy or Eleanor or anyone else in that room, because I knew that if I did, whatever I had been holding together for the past 90 minutes would come apart in a place I could not afford. Judge Ortega walked in. Everyone rose. She sat. We sat. She opened the case file, looked at it for a moment. That felt like it lasted several geological epochs, and then looked up. I've reviewed all submitted materials in this matter, she said. The forensic analysis submitted by the respondent is thorough, methodologically sound, and carries substantial evidentiary weight under California rules of evidence. The sworn affidavits corroborate the documentary findings. The police report establishes a parallel criminal record. She paused. The signatures on all 3 documents submitted by the petitioner's counsel are determined to be fraudulent. The emergency guardianship petition filed under the name Morgan A. Vance is therefore void ab initio, invalid from its inception, as if it had never been filed. Void ab initio. Latin never existed. I had spent 2 weeks being legally attached to a case I had never agreed to enter, and in 30 seconds a woman with wire-rimmed glasses and 20 years on the bench had erased it. My eyes burned so badly I had to press my thumbnail hard into my palm to stay focused. Regarding the 3 minor children, Judge Ortega continued, this court has reviewed the separate custody petition filed by Garrison Blake 6 months prior, accompanied by a favorable home evaluation from the California Department of Social Services. That petition had been contested by Cassidy at the time of filing and was awaiting a full hearing date, which had not yet been scheduled when this fraud came to light. The favorable CDSS home evaluation attached to his filing had been completed and was already part of this court's record. Mr. Blake's petition was already under review by this court. In light of today's findings regarding the fraudulent nature of the current guardianship arrangement, and in the interest of the children's immediate welfare, this court grants temporary physical custody to Garrison Blake effective today, pending a full custody hearing to be scheduled within 60 days. She looked directly at Cassidy's table. The evidence submitted today has been forwarded to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges, including forgery under California Penal Code Section 470 and identity theft under Section 530.5. That process is now outside the jurisdiction of this court. Then she looked at our table. A civil harassment restraining order under California Code of Civil Procedure Section 527.6 is granted in favor of Morgan Vance against Cassidy Vance, Eleanor Vance, and Arthur Vance, effective immediately. Any contact, direct or indirect, constitutes a violation. She closed the file. We're adjourned. I heard Eleanor make a sound behind me. Sharp, strangled, the sound of someone who had spent 60 years controlling outcomes, discovering that this one had slipped entirely out of her hands. I did not turn around. Victoria put her hand briefly on my forearm and squeezed once, and that was enough. In the hallway, a man I had never met in person was crouching down to Tyler's level, talking to him in a low, steady voice. Garrison Blake was taller than I expected, quieter. He had Tyler's same serious eyes. He looked up when I came out of the courtroom and nodded, not a greeting exactly, more an acknowledgement. The nod of someone who understood that we had both been fighting for the same 3 people from opposite sides of a very complicated situation. Avery ran to me before I reached them. She grabbed both my hands and squeezed so hard her knuckles went pale. "Are we going with that man?" she asked. Her voice was doing the wobble that meant she was 4 seconds from crying and trying very hard not to be. I crouched down to her level. My chest felt like something had taken a fist to it. "His name is Garrison," I said. "He's your dad's sweetheart. He's been waiting a long time to take care of you. But what about you? I pulled her into a hug and pressed my face into her hair and breathed in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and did not let myself fall apart because she needed me to be steady right now, and being steady for people who needed it was the one thing I had always known how to do. I'm always going to love you, I told her. That part doesn't change, ever. Lily wrapped both arms around my leg and refused to let go for a full minute. I stood there and let her one hand on Avery's shoulder until Garrison gently, carefully peeled Lily away and murmured something to her that made her giggle despite herself. Then Tyler walked over. He moved the way he always did, deliberately unhurried, like he was carrying something breakable inside his chest and had learned to account for it. He stopped in front of me and looked up, and his jaw was tight the way a 10-year-old's jaw goes tight when he is refusing to cry in a public hallway. "Tyler," I started. "I knew you'd come," he said. His voice was rough at the edges, the way voices get when they are working very hard against themselves. "You always show up, Aunt Morgan, even when it's hard." Something cracked open in the center of my chest, clean and total, like a fault line giving way after years of pressure. My eyes filled so fast I couldn't blink it back, and for the first time in 6 weeks I stopped trying. I pulled Tyler into a hug and held on, and he held on back with the grip of a kid who had been waiting a long time for someone to make this right. And I cried into his shoulder in the hallway of a courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, and did not feel ashamed of a single tear. We stood like that until Garrison said softly, "We should go." I straightened up, wiped my face with the back of my hand. Watching Garrison walk the three of them toward the elevator, Tyler turned back once to look at me, Avery waving with both hands, Lily already asking Garrison something that made him laugh. I stood in that hallway until the elevator doors closed. Then I took out my phone. There was an email from a Denver area code, a Meridian Health satellite office. I had submitted an application to 6 weeks ago before any of this started, in a moment of quiet certainty that Los Angeles had given me everything it had to give. "Dear Ms. Vance, we are pleased to offer you the position of Senior Risk Assessment Director." I read it twice. My hands were still shaking slightly. The fluorescent lights in the hallway hummed the same note they had hummed all morning, indifferent to everything that had just happened in room 47. I typed 2 words back: "I accept." November in Denver arrives without asking permission. One morning, the mountains are brown and gold at the edges, and the next morning you wake up, and the ridgeline is white, and the sky above it is the particular blue that has no smog in it, no marine layer, no brown haze sitting over the basin the way it does in Los Angeles. It is simply blue, the way blue is supposed to be, and it takes your breath away every single time, even when you are standing at your kitchen counter in your socks, waiting for your coffee to finish brewing. I had been in my 8th-floor apartment for 3 weeks when the biscuit-colored box arrived from a Silver Lake return address. It was smaller than I expected, and heavier, packed with enough bubble wrap to protect something genuinely fragile. Inside, nested in a bed of brown packing paper, was a cactus, small, stubborn-looking, planted in an unglazed terracotta pot with a piece of masking tape on the bottom that said "Do not overwater" in Rachel's handwriting. The note card tucked beside it read, "Low maintenance, thrives on its own, just like you, are." I set the cactus on my windowsill where it would catch the morning light, and I laughed a real laugh, the kind that starts in the chest and doesn't ask for permission. The first one in longer than I could accurately remember. Then I sat down on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and let myself feel everything I had been too busy to feel for the past 2 months. It was not pretty. It involved a significant amount of ugly crying and 1.5 cups of cold coffee. But when I stood up 40 minutes later, I felt lighter than I had since the summer. The news from Los Angeles came in pieces over the following weeks, the way it always does when a family unravels, not all at once, but in small successive revelations, each one landing with a dull weight. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office had formally opened a criminal investigation into Cassidy and Eleanor for forgery under California Penal Code Section 470 and identity theft under Section 530.5. The process was slow, the way criminal processes always are. Evidence review, grand jury consideration. the grinding machinery of a system that moved at its own pace, regardless of how urgently you wanted resolution. There were no convictions yet. There might not be for a long time. But the case was open, the evidence was documented, and the machine was moving. Cassidy had lost 2 brand partnerships she had been cultivating on social media companies that did quiet, efficient background checks when legal trouble became public record. She was living in a rental in Burbank, doing what Cassidy had always done, which was finding a way to keep going through sheer force of not acknowledging how much damage she had caused. Tyler, Avery, and Lily were with Garrison in Glendale. Victoria had forwarded me one date. The children were enrolled in school. Lily had joined a tumbling class. Tyler had made the chess team. I read that email 4 times. Eleanor and Arthur had withdrawn from most of their community activities in Pasadena. The neighborhood association, the church committee, the monthly dinner group that had met at their house for 11 years. Whether this was voluntary or the natural consequence of neighbors learning what public court records contain, I genuinely did not know. What I knew was that the woman who had built her identity around being seen as the warm, capable center of her family had lost the audience that made that identity mean something. I did not feel triumphant about any of it. I want to be clear about that. What I felt was something quieter and harder to name, a kind of grief for the family I had believed we were, mixed with the steady, practical relief of someone who had narrowly escaped a situation that could have taken years to untangle. On the 1st of December, I transferred $500 to a nonprofit that provided educational support for children in the California foster care and CPS system. I did it quietly online at 7 in the morning before my first meeting of the day. It was not a grand gesture. It was just the thing I wanted to do with money I had now that I had more of it in a city where nobody expected anything from me except the work I had been hired to do. My new office had a window that faced the mountains. On clear mornings, and there were many clear mornings, I could see the snow line shifting incrementally higher as winter settled in. My colleagues were professional and direct, and did not ask personal questions, which I appreciated more than I could adequately express. I called Victoria once in the second week of November just to say thank you. She told me not to thank her, that I had done the work, that she had simply provided the framework. I told her that was a very lawyerly way of looking at it. She laughed short, genuine, and told me to call if I ever needed her again. I hoped I would not need to. But I kept her number exactly where it was. The cactus on the windowsill had not died. In fact, I was fairly certain it was growing, though it was doing so in the slow, unhurried way that cacti do, everything on its own timeline without requiring anything from me, except the occasional acknowledgement that it existed. I could relate to that. The drawing is still on my kitchen table. I have moved it twice, once when I needed the space to spread out a work file, once when I spilled coffee and had to rescue it from the edge. But it always ends up back in the same spot, flat against the wood grain, the 2 crayon figures standing under their yellow tree. Lily drew it sometime in October, according to the postmark, which means she drew it while all of it was still happening, while her mother was sitting in a lawyer's office, and her grandmother was making phone calls. She believed no one would ever trace back to her, while a family court judge in downtown Los Angeles was reading through 34 pages of forensic analysis. While all of that was burning, a 4-year-old sat down with a box of crayons and drew me standing next to her under a tree. I think about that a lot. Here is what I have learned, and I am not going to dress it up or soften it, because you did not come this far with me to get a list of inspirational bullet points. The people who use you are rarely strangers. They are the ones who know exactly which version of you to appeal to, the loyal one, the capable one, the one who was raised to believe that family obligation and personal sacrifice are the same thing. They know how to make a request sound like love. They know how to make your refusal sound like abandonment. They have been practicing on you for years, and they are very good at it, and none of that is your fault. But here is the other thing. The one that took me longer to understand being used is not a character flaw. It is what happens when a kind person encounters a system, familial, legal, social, that was quietly designed to take advantage of that kindness. The answer is not to become less kind. The answer is to become better armed. Document everything. I mean this literally. Every text message, every voicemail, every email that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, screenshot it, timestamp it, back it up, somewhere that is not your family's shared cloud account. Not because you are planning for war, but because documentation is the language that systems understand. Courts do not run on feelings, they run on evidence. And evidence is just the careful, consistent record of what actually happened. Find your Victoria Chen. She does not have to be a family lawyer in Koreatown. She can be a tenants' rights advocate, a domestic violence counselor, a legal aid clinic, a workers' rights organization. What matters is that she knows the rules of the system that is being used against you, and that she is on your side, and that she does not close her legal pad until the work is done. Those people exist. They are in your city right now. The hardest part is picking up the phone. Say your name clearly. This is the part nobody tells you about. Not the filing of the paperwork, not the sitting in the courtroom, not the moment the judge reads the verdict. It is the moment before all of that when someone in your family tells you that your name on a document is not really your name, that your signature on a contract does not really count, that your identity is something the family can allocate as needed, like a spare bedroom or a Sunday afternoon. The moment you look back at them and say clearly and without apology, "That is not how this works," that is the moment everything changes. Not because it fixes anything immediately, but because you have told the truth out loud, and now you cannot unknow it. I am 34 years old. I have a new job, a new city, a view of mountains that I will probably never entirely get used to, and a cactus on my windowsill that is against all reasonable odds thriving. I have 3 nieces and a nephew who are safe and enrolled in school and living in a house where someone is paying attention to them for the right reasons. I think about them every day. I love them in an uncomplicated, non-negotiable way that does not require proximity or legal paperwork or family approval to remain true. And I have learned finally at 34 in a courthouse hallway in downtown Los Angeles the difference between the family you were born into and the family you choose to protect. Sometimes those are the same people. Sometimes they are not. The bravest thing I ever did was tell the truth about which was which. Lily's drawing is still on my table. I am not taking it down.